Hey guys, my name's Steve, this is Heroine's Corner and welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to be talking about black trauma, the black fantasy genre, and then also I'm going to be talking about some of the black fantasy books that I'm planning to read in the next couple of months. So there's a lot to get to as always. Let's get straight into the video. Remember, if you like me, if you like my video, remember to like and subscribe. With it being Black History Month in the USA, there's been a lot of discussion just like on social media about black trauma and about black joy, and I really wanted to kind of talk about why the black fantasies and black fantasy stories and characters are so important to me and to probably a lot of like black people when it comes to just seeing ourselves represented in different stories. When it comes to the black trauma that we see so much in the media, and we see so much when it comes to our stories and what stories are told, they're usually about like black trauma and black pain and black suffering. And that is not to say that these stories should not be talked about. Obviously there are, because being a black person like in the world is not an easy experience at all, and there's a lot of painful history tied to just black people. So I'm not saying that these narratives do not need to be told or aren't important, but I feel like it's really important to say that these aren't our only narratives. Okay, I do not wake up and think about the slave trade every day. Like, I do not wake up and think about police brutality every day, because if I did, I would be a mess. There is a lot of exhaustion that comes with these issues that we see like so often in the media, and we really need to make sure that when we think about black stories and black people, we aren't always attaching it to trauma. We need to make sure that we are seeing black people in joyful experiences and settings and stories, and that's where the black fantasy genre comes in. In the fantasy genre, anything can happen. Anything can happen. I can't even like describe in words, because fantasy is fiction. You can just make stuff up. You can have all these exciting and varied different stories, and it's so important to me as a fantasy nerd, as a person who loves superheroes, who loves the sci-fi stuff. It's so important to me to see black people in those narratives, because it kind of just demonstrates that we are more than our pain, we are more than our suffering, and we are able to be whole individuals without focusing on our trauma. In my childhood, I'm still technically really I'm still young, but in my childhood, in my teenage years, I rarely saw black people in fantasy and in sci-fi. That does something. If you're not seeing yourself in those narratives, you don't feel like you are a part of those narratives. And I feel like if you're white, you don't understand the kind of layers to not seeing yourself in media. Like, you really do not understand what that does to just your imagination as well. If you're not seeing yourself in a certain setting, how are you supposed to imagine that setting is for you? I just want to say here as well that I'm not saying that racism or discrimination can't be a part of the narrative. I feel like I saw a very accurate tweet. It's about saying that our narratives aren't just racism, or the narrative does not wholly center on racism. It can be a part of the narrative, of course, because that's just a part of being black. Our narrative isn't racism, but racism is a part of our narrative. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense or not. I just feel like the fantasy genre has so much potential to showing black characters and black stories as being so just multifaceted and full of black joy and complexity, and showing characters that aren't just there to say, oh, racism's bad, or to tell white people not to be racist anymore. But fantasy genre is there to just explore and to be adventurous and to be full of wonder, and that's what I love about fantasy, and that's why I feel like the fantasy genre is so important when it comes to breaking down this kind of bias in publishing when it comes to racism books, or racism 101 books, or black trauma books. I feel like the fantasy genre is so important to breaking down that bias in publishing, and to just give black children, and not even just black children, but just black adults, another way of seeing themselves in the media. And I think we should also talk about how to be black is to be immediately politicized, and we see this so often in certain spaces in social media when if there's a black person in the news article or the topic of discussion, it's like automatically Black Lives Matter is like tied to that. And obviously like Black Lives Matter, that shouldn't be like a political statement, but in this day and age, like that's a political statement. So it's almost like we don't have an identity outside of the political like sphere. There's two kind of different caricatures that are like arising in conversations. It's either the black comedic caricature, or we have the black BRM caricature, if that makes sense. So it's either like we're there for ridicule, for comedic purposes only, or we're there to just tell white people not to be racist anymore. Even though Black Lives Matter and like black activism is really important to me, I'm not talking about black politics every minute of my day. I don't know, it's just really nice reading a story and it not just being about racism or being about discrimination, because even though those books are important, if those are the only things that are going to be talked about, it gets draining and it gets like irritating almost. Like I am more than my identity as a black person. That is a really important identity to me, but I don't always need to be reminded 24/7 that I am a black person, and I will probably face like really unfair situations or circumstances. I don't need to be reminded of that 24/7, and that's why fantasy is almost my comfort genre. It's my utopia place when I need to just go and forget that all these bad things are happening in the world, to just see yourself in a story and get lost in a story and see yourself having adventures. That's a privilege that a lot of white people have and a lot of black people don't have. I'll probably talk about this topic like more in depth like in the future, but I wanted to do a video about the black fantasy books I wanted to read, and I feel like that was just a really important discussion that I wanted to put at the front of that of this video. So that's this video's little ramble, because you know I love to ramble in my videos. But yeah, I want to get on to the black fantasy books that I am dying to read. I have a lot of catching up to do when it comes to black fantasy, by the way, so don't judge me on this pile, but I have a lot to catch up on. So the first book I'm going to say is just a really popular one, so I need to just get out of the way, and that's Children of Blood and Bone Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. So this is a book, obviously I'm not going to really talk about it. It's about a I don't want to talk about it too much, but it's basically about a girl who has magic, and her people in this kind of world shouldn't have magic, and magic is supposed to be like disappearing. So her and the daughter of like the king, who's like a tyrant, go and try to bring back magic. I'm pretty sure that is the synopsis of this book. I wanted to pick up this book ages ago actually, but the sequel came out, and there's a lot of mixed reviews about the sequel, so I kind of got turned off like starting the series. But I think I'm going to just start the series and read this as a standalone, and that's it. Like I don't think I'm going to adventure into the second book. I don't think the third book's out yet, but maybe I'll see the reviews about the third book and see if that changes my point of view about reading the rest of the series. And apparently this is getting a Lucasfilm adaptation, so Lucasfilm are the people behind Star Wars, of course, so I need to read this book before that comes out, obviously. So the next book we've got is Daughters of Nari by Rennie K. Amayo, and apparently this is a book written by a black British author as well, which is just like chef's kiss. But yeah, this cover is absolutely stunning. It was really the cover that like brought me into this book, because it's just, look at that cover. It's so I don't really know about a lot about this book. If you don't already know, I don't really like reading the summaries of books, of course, but I think this is basically about two sisters, and they're kind of like separated at birth, but they both have magic. I think they're both goddesses, and then they need to like come together to defeat like a great evil that's going to be happening. I'm not really sure, but this cover is just telling me I just want to read this already because of this cover. It's so stunning. I don't know if this has a sequel or not. I feel like it has a sequel, but yeah, obviously really want to get to this book, of course. So the next book I got, I'm pretty sure it's an adult fantasy, and that is David, Mogul God Hunter by Sue Davis Okungbowa. And this is basically a fantasy book set in Lagos, which is like awesome. And I think like the gods, like the Nigerian gods have like descended in Lagos, and they are causing like destruction and havoc. And obviously our main protagonist David is like half, I think he's like a demigod, and he's basically out to hunt the gods. I think he's looking for like a specific god to help him get rid of all the other gods. Again, I don't like reading summaries, but yeah, I can't wait. And I know this author is also coming out with another book. I think it's a YA this year, so I want to get to that book, but first I want to read like this book. But yeah, a fantasy set in Lagos and the gods are loose. Like, yeah, I want to read this book. Then the next book we've got is a pretty well-known fantasy as well, and that is Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. And this is a adult fantasy book, and it's pretty chunky. I've heard it's like Game of Thrones, and like that comparison means nothing to me because I have not watched Game of Thrones or read any of the books, and I do not plan to. But the comparison that really got me with this book is someone saying that it's like Red Rising, and I have not talked about Red Rising on this channel, but Red Rising is like, it's like my book baby. Like that is my heart in book form. Like the Red Rising trilogy is just all me. I absolutely adore it. And if someone's comparing Rage of Dragons to Red Rising, I'm picking up this book. Like I do not care. So yeah, apparently it has dragons in as well, I'm guessing. But it's really the Red Rising comparison that got me. But yeah, I can't wait to read this book. I think it's a trilogy. I'm pretty sure the second book has came out. But yeah, this is just a book about like revenge and like vengeance, and I think this guy, like the main protagonist, is out to like get revenge. Those are the top fantasy books I want to read that I physically have, and now onto some of the books that I don't physically have but I still want to read. So the first book I have to say is King of Horizon by Callison Calendar. And this book, the first book, I actually have the first book with me. So this was the first book of that series, Islands of Blood and Storm. That's the series, and I read this book last year and I absolutely adored it. And the thing is, I do not see BookTube talking about this book. I don't know if I just missed all the hype on BookTube, but this book was just so amazing. This has a grey protagonist, and when I mean like morally grey, I mean morally grey. She is not the heroine in any kind of sense of that word. A lot of the fantasy books that come out are very much about like West Africa, I feel like, and it was really just refreshing to see like a Caribbean fantasy. But I absolutely adore this book. It's basically a book about a girl seeking revenge against this like group of white people who own the islands, and to do that she wants to become like the head of all the islands and like own all the islands or something like that. Like I'm not explaining this very well, but this book is so good and I just absolutely loved it, and I can't wait for the sequel, King of Rising. It's already out, but I haven't picked it up yet for some reason, so I'm definitely going to pick it up soon, and it has such a beautiful cover on as well. And then the next book that I'm planning to read this year is, of course, it has to be Wings of Ebony by J.L. And this is a book that I am so excited and hyped for. Like, just the cover is just, it's just so amazing. And this book basically centered around a girl in Houston, I'm pretty sure, and she goes into this like magical world, and then she comes back to Houston, and there's like evil lurking in Houston, so she's like trying to take out the evil. Basically has to save both the like godly world and the human world, because she has like god ancestry. I absolutely like cannot wait to read this book. I've pre-ordered it. I'm going to get it as soon as I get it. I'm going to read it. So the next book I'm really excited about is actually written by a Black British author as well, and that is Witches Steeped in Gold by Shannon Smart. Now this is a book which is Jamaican inspired, so it's a Jamaican inspired fantasy, which is all I want to hear, and I'm already picking up the book. But apparently there's two witches and they're supposed to be rivals, but they actually need to work together to like bring down the ruler or something of a matriarch. I'm not sure. I don't really need to know more about this, to be honest, but anyway, because it's Jamaican inspired fantasy, so you've already sold me. I'm already getting the book. There's nothing else I need to know. The cover is stunning as well, so Jamaican inspired fantasy, I'm here for it. And there's two rival witches that need to work together. I'm also here for it. So the next book I want to talk about is an N.K. Jemisin book, and I have not read any N.K. Jemisin books, but I feel like this will be the one to get me hooked on N.K. Jemisin, and that is The City We Became. And this is a fantasy that is set in modern day, so it's set in the contemporary world, and I think there's a city, I'm not sure what city it is, it may be New York, I don't know, it's in America, and there's a city, and it's kind of divided up into different parts, and there's a person, like almost like a superhero, who like protects that certain part, and then they have to like come together, and for some reason I'm not really sure what the exact plot of this book is, but that just sounds interesting. The city plays a huge role in like the story, and I am really intimidated by all of the other N.K. Jemisin books, so I am going to go with this one. I'm not sure if it's a standalone or not, but I know there's only one book in that series at the moment, if it is like an actual series. So I really want to get to The City We Became, and yeah, it just sounds like a really awesome book. So that's all the books I wanted to talk about today, and of course there are so many other books that I want to get into, and I also want to do a separate video when it comes to sci-fi reads, because I like separating my fantasy from my sci-fi. But yeah, that is it for today's video, guys. I hope you understood some of my points I was trying to get across at the first part of this video, and it did seem like too much of a ramble. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe down below. Comment below any of these books that if you've read them, if they're on your TBR, if you're interested in them, just let me know. But yeah, I'll see you guys soon on another video. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.